Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Syracuse Sports. My name is Brent Axe. It is so great to have you on board, as always. Thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and thanks for subscribing. Make sure you do so on Spotify, Apple, our Syracuse Orange Sports on YouTube page, so you get new episodes of Syracuse Sports delivered to you when they're fresh and hot out of the podcast oven. I am excited about our guest today, Noah Eagle. 5 years ago, he's sitting in my class at Syracuse University, and now he's one of the prominent play-by-play broadcasters in sports. You can no longer say he's up and coming, he's next generation, or whatever fancy term you want to put on it. He has arrived. He's called Super Bowls. Now, mind you, it's for Nickelodeon next to Patrick and SpongeBob SquarePants, right? But that Nickelodeon broadcast has carved out such a unique niche, and Noah has done an incredible job with that. He's called the greatest comeback in NFL history. He's been the voice of Saturday night Big Ten football for NBC Sports. He called the last French Open for NBC Sports as those rights have shifted over to TNT. I've left out a bunch of big events that Noah has already done at 26 years old, and it's about to get bigger. Now, full disclaimer here, we did not talk about this because as I record this, it's not officially official yet, but one of the worst kept secrets out there in the media world is that the new NBA rights package is going to include NBC getting back into the game. So cue up the round ball rock. And Noah is certainly going to jump into the fray here. Now think of Bob Costas, Marv Albert, Mike Tirico, who will certainly, I think, be named the prominent one, if you will, play-by-play broadcaster for NBC Sports when they get the NBA back. But Noah's going to be 1A, and he is going to be one of the guys right there at the top of the list calling NBA games when NBC inevitably gets this package here, which will be announced shortly if it hasn't already by the time this podcast comes out, right? So, disclaimer, Noah and I did not talk about that, right? But the next big step for Noah, and I think these worlds cross over, so I think the conversations will be similar in a way. Noah is going to be the play-by-play voice for men's and women's Olympic basketball on NBC and Peacock and the NBC family starting next month in Paris. Another incredible assignment for a 26-year-old broadcaster. And yes, the son of Ian Eagle, another Syracuse alum who is right up there as one of the best play-by-play broadcasters in history, right? But Noah, as we said, has carved out his own name, and we will have a conversation with him about the Olympics and so much more coming up. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm also looking forward to hearing from our Syracuse Sports insiders on a series that Emily Leiker and I have going, and you're going to get the next two in that series this week. What Emily and I did is went back and looked at the recruiting classes for Syracuse football from 2020 on. So 2020 and 2021, those episodes are available. Check your feeds for Syracuse Sports. If you subscribe, they're there for you. Listen to them. 2022 and 2023 will come out this week, and we would love to hear from you, the Syracuse Sports Insiders. Go back and look at those classes. Tell us who you think were overvalued, undervalued, met expectation. And see, the conversation is going to change a little bit this week because obviously these classes are a little more fresh, right? We had the answers to the test with 2020 and 2021. With 2022 and 2023, especially 2023, there's a lot to be determined, right? So regrading those recruiting classes is going to get really interesting. So Emily and I are going to do that. I'm planning our next draft, the starting five Syracuse basketball all-time draft with Eric Devendorf and our Frankie Sarancino, our insider, who was terrific on that pod. Was great. Still getting feedback from you guys on that. I know Dave Bing was on the board too long. But that's what's great about these things is the feedback we get from you on our Syracuse Sports Insiders. So look back on that 2022 and 2023 recruiting class. Send me your thoughts, and we'll include those in the next two pods that we are going to do looking back on Syracuse football recruiting. And to become a Syracuse Sports Insider, all you have to do is text the word orange to 315-847-3895. Try it free for 2 weeks. You get texts from me. You can text me directly. If I have breaking news, you're going to get it first. If I have opinions, thoughts, things I want to run by you guys, we're planning some live podcasts coming soon. Looking forward to that. In person, by the way. You guys had great feedback on that, Top 5 Fridays, and so much more that we're doing and that you get to hang with as a Syracuse Sports Insider. So we would love if you could join today. All right, without further ado, let's get to it. My man, Noah Eagle on Syracuse Sports. Noah, we speak here just hours after the Boston Celtics have won a championship, and you have had the great fortune to call championship events with SpongeBob and Patrick by your side, right? Some high-level NFL playoff games. But, one thing that you're involved in now, and you did it with the Clippers, of course, as well. So you've done this with two teams now. It's just that day-to-day beat of being with one team, right?
Yeah.
Is that the dream for you to be able to – now, the interesting thing is you wouldn't be on the call of a Nets championship per se from a local perspective because everything shifts to network, right? But
sure.
Hearing a championship call last night, Mike Breen, you've had the opportunity to do one generically for a team. What's like the dream call for you?
Yeah, well, I think that the spot that I'm in right now, Brent, is I work with a team that I grew up as a diehard fan of. In fact, I'm wearing a Nets shirt right now, right?
There you go.
So the Nets fandom is pulsing through my blood. And so in theory, having them win a championship for the first time in the NBA, they won a couple ABA championships, and that's basically as far as their banners go. They've got a couple Eastern Conference championship trophies from the early 2000s with Jason Kidd. But to have that and to have that moment that, any sports fan is waiting their whole life for is amazing. The other side of that, and this is what I tell anybody that wants to do this, and I think anybody that does do this would say the same thing. For any of us who grew up diehard fans, the dream is to be a soundtrack of a championship. And so if you're a soundtrack of a team that wins a championship, and now someone buys the championship DVD, if those even exist, or Stream Link or whatever it might be, and pops on the tape of the season, and they get to hear your calls that narrate what eventually became the last team standing, that's as special as it gets. So I don't know if I look at it and say, if I don't get to do that, it's a fail. But I'm sure that anybody who grew up wanting to do this, that's honest with themselves, would say that being on the call for a season that ends in complete victory is really the pinnacle of sports. So it would be amazing. It was really cool. Our friend Drew Carter got a chance to do that this year with the Celtics, which is really awesome in year one. It's going to be hard to follow up now.
Sure. Yeah. Where do you go from here?
Yeah. And then, well, every year we're going to do, no, not every year. It's harder than that. But I would say to be in that position would be incredibly special.
Yeah. I think your dad's in the same position. You both have had this opportunity to do these high level events for networks. And I've asked your dad about this, and I want to get your perspective on it now that you've had the chance to do it with two teams. You've called games for NBC, for high-level networks here and big-time events, as we're going to talk about here, a big one coming up for you in the Olympics. But what is that satisfaction of the process of being there, game in, game out, Nets, Timberwolves on a Tuesday in February, and being part of a team broadcast like that, even though you've kind of gotten a taste of something broader and bigger than that?
Yeah. So when I was with the Clippers, and that was, I got to see my dad do it, to your point. And so I knew kind of what it looked like from the outsider's perspective. And I had, I guess, a slight step in the door of exactly how the sausage was made. But you don't really fully get the experience until you're sitting in that seat every day, to your point. And so when I get to the Clippers, I didn't really expect to fall in love with the guys and the coaches and the front office the way that I did, just because you were around them every day. You see them on the plane, you see them on the bus, you see them in the hotel, you see them at the practice facility, you see the work that goes into building the team, and then going and fielding the team, and then going and executing as a team really every single day. And so it's so easy to want to see them succeed because you see the work that gets put in. And so for my dad, it's a little different because he joined the Nets and they weren't great. They eventually started making the playoffs, and then they were really contenders by year 8. of him doing it, year 9 of him doing the team. I got to LA and that team was expected to win a championship right away. So the pressure was so different. Each game felt big, each game felt important. And that was eye-opening in itself. But it's easy to just be enchanted by the process and then to really get hung up on the results. And I think that's what I learned after a couple of years was at the end of the day, the results are what they are. For me, what's still important is doing a great job on the air. And so I didn't let the wins and losses affect me as much as I did maybe year 1, year 2. By the time I got to year 3 and 4, I had gotten some more perspective of, okay, I'm going to do well regardless. Of course, I want this team to succeed. I want them to win every possible game because I'm attached to them. And the same goes for Brooklyn right now. But I still care about my product more than anything else and making sure that I do a good job. So it's amazing to be a part of it. It's amazing to build the relationships within the teams. But at the end of the day, the broadcast is still paramount.
So all this leads to a big assignment you've got coming up here, calling the Olympics, both the men's and women's basketball teams in Paris. This is such a nerdy broadcast insider baseball question, but I got to ask it because I'm fascinated by this stuff, as you know, Noah. What is your preparation process for this? You know, we're about a month away. It sounds like the Olympics are 8 months down the road, but we're going to snap a finger and it's going to be here. So what has been your preparation process to call both these men's and women's Olympics and how that continues right up until the moment you land in Paris?
Yeah, I figured that, I've been kind of doing some loose stuff. I'd gone to a Team USA summit a couple months ago where I got to see Grant Hill, who's a part of the Team USA infrastructure, Jim Tooley, the CEO of Team USA. So getting to talk to them just in general and hearing about the process of selecting the teams, hearing about who they would think they could leave on and off some of the teams, if you get my drift on the women's side. Just hearing some of that was important, I thought, just to get some perspective. The other thing that I'm doing right now as kind of the pre-prep is I'm reading a book about the Dream Team because I want to get as much history and important history with Team USA. We all know about the Dream Team. We all watched the documentary, the 30 for 30, or really it was NBA produced on NBA TV, but we all watched it, right? So we know that, but this gives you a little bit extra context as to why they started using NBA players, how USA basketball was formed as opposed to what it was in its infancy, and a lot of that. So it's been good to kind of have that. And I did that just the same thing as I got ready for the French Open was I read 4 different books to just broaden my knowledge a little bit historically. So that's kind of the first step. And then from there, I'll make charts, obviously, for Team USA men and women. We know the first 3 games in the first 3 countries that each of them will play in their seeding game, so to speak, that kind of round robin format in the first week. And then from there, you just got to figure it out. Now, I will say I'm going to hedge myself a little bit, especially on the men's side. They don't play France. They don't play Canada early, but those are teams that I expect to be in that second week, expect to be contending for medals. So I'll probably make charts for those as well. But realistically, it's no different than any other game. I'm probably going to have to put a little bit more effort on the non-US teams just because they're not players that we're accustomed to seeing. And I did some 5-on-5 in the last Olympics of non-US games. That was the biggest thing, was learning the players and learning how to identify the players because we've never seen them before. Slovenia, yeah, they have Luka Doncic and they have Goran Dragic's brother. Outside of that, you don't really know who else is on the team. And so you've got to figure out, watching tape and listening to podcasts and reading articles, how you can identify each player very quickly on a drop of a hat and a moment's notice, all of that. So that's probably the biggest hurdle. And then on top of all that, the best thing for me is NBC has an incredible research department. They send us a ton of information. They send it in a very compact and easily digestible way. So I trust them to at least give us the fuel, and we just have to use it the right way.
You mentioned reading that book about the Dream Team. I just remember the formulation of that team, the disappointment of the 88 team losing, and there's always a Syracuse connection, right, Noah? Syracuse, Georgetown, it's got to be 1989. I'm pretty sure it was. I will never forget seeing this, and I haven't been able to find a photo of this. But there was a giant, it was a sheet. Somebody took a giant white sheet and just wrote the words, "Where's the gold, John?" and hung it from the banner from the upper deck of the dome because
Nice.
John Thompson coached the '88 team.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that just smacked you in the face of, wait a minute, what happened here? All of a sudden, the dream team comes abound in 1992. But to hear you say Doncic, and that's the influence of that team, Noah, you know
Yeah.
as well as anybody. And here we are in 2024, and that kind of leads me to what I want to talk about next. The dream team was just, I mean, that team slaughtered people in
Yeah.
every game they played. But here in 2024, Team USA is just another good team. We're now seeing the results of that dream team before our very eyes. So that kind of leads me to, so look, Team USA is great, and we'll talk about him here, but the influence of that dream team to now in 2024 and how the great players are spread all over the Olympics here, I would still put Team USA as the favorite.
For sure.
Who are some of the other teams, though, that you think are knocking on their door?
Yeah, well, to your point, so you go 88 to 92, right? It was the first iteration of that. I think 04 to 08, second iteration of that. But the difference of the 2008 team, which many people consider to be just as good or close to as good as the dream team, with a prime LeBron James and Dwayne Wade and Bosh, and then Kobe in his element from start to finish, and Coach K coaching the team and all of that. The difference was of 08 to 92, Spain was arguably as tough an opponent as the USA had faced, other than when they lost in 04, other than when they had lost in 08. But realistically, Spain was better than Argentina in 2004. I don't think anybody would debate that. Sure, Manu Ginobili was incredible, and they had NBA players, but it wasn't like having two Gasols and having, Ricky Rubio and Rudy Fernandez and a group that had been together, had grown together, and learned to play together. That was what the challenge was. And then eventually in 2012, they added Serge Ibaka to that team. So the United States had challenges, but it really felt like it was one challenge in 2008, one challenge in 2012. Can they beat Spain, which they did both times? The difference now is it feels like it's multiple challenges. So I mentioned France. They're the host country. They're going to be juiced up. There were a lot of rumors that Joel Embiid was going to play for them. And if that was the case, and he's, of course, playing for the United States now, if he played for France, they would have been as formidable an opponent, I think, as we've ever seen for the United States. It would have been Embiid, Wembanyama, Gobert, Batum, Fournier, Ntilikina, Koulibaly. These are all NBA guys. Potentially the top two picks in the NBA draft this year are both going to be from France. So you start to go down the list, not to mention they'll have the crowd behind them. That's a really good team. That's a really, really good team. So even without Embiid, they should be formidable. Canada should be, in my opinion, if they're not the number 2 team, they're easily 2A or 2B, because you've got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who a lot of people thought should have or could have won MVP this year. Jamal Murray, who we've seen in clutch moments be just a killer. Lou Dort, an outstanding perimeter defender, can absolutely go and lock up an opponent's best perimeter player. And then Zach Edey, who will be a first-round pick. And I honestly, after doing a number of Purdue games, believe that he can be an impact player in the NBA. I'm not saying he's going to be a star, but he's 7'4", 300 pounds. He moves incredibly well. He's got some of the best hands that I've seen. His skill set took a massive leap from National Player of the Year to National Player of the Year. I mean, the dude is a great player. And then they've got RJ Barrett, and they've got Dwight Powell, and they've got Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I mean, that's a really good team as well. And they've got a great coach in Jordi Fernandez, the new Brooklyn Nets head coach. So that's going to be a great one. I mean, Germany just won the World Cup last year with Schroeder and the Wagners and a ton of NBA talent on that roster. You've got Serbia with Nikola Jokic, a 3-time MVP who has shown that he can single-handedly win games. Slovenia or Greece, one of them will make it, one of them will not. So we'll have either Giannis or we're going to have Luka. And I think part of that will depend on the health of either one of them. But to your point, it's a much more global game. It's not just one threat anymore. It feels like there are a number of them. I mean, Australia won the bronze medal in 2021, and they're always a good team. And so we're not even talking about a Spain who still has great players, or an Argentina who still has great players. But we're talking about a legitimate competition that we're going to have.
No, on the women's side, it feels like maybe they're still the equivalent of the Dream Team in 1992 because they just can't be beat. What are they, 70-3?
Yeah.
The margins of victory that they have. This is an incredible roster here. And look, I've lost track of my Caitlin Clark controversies. Like, which one are we on today? I'm confused, right? But certainly when she was not added to this Olympic team, fire up the first take machines, and everybody had an opinion about that. And I feel like it's an interesting discussion. You look at Christian Leitner in 92, while the circumstances were different. He was the back-to-back national champion. He was the biggest name in college at the time. People felt maybe Shaq should have been on that team, and we can revisit that. Say all you want about Caitlin Clark, she draws eyeballs, and she is a great player. But I think it speaks to something here that you can tell us about, Noah. There is a process to get on this Olympic team.
Yeah.
And she'll be on plenty of Olympic teams. The players that are on this team have gone through that process. It is the best roster. And I feel like at the end of the day, who are you bumping off this roster for Caitlin Clark? As good as she is, that is a credit to how stacked Team USA is on the women's side.
Yeah, I mean, Arike Ogunbowale could have easily made the roster herself. Is averaging, I think, 26 points per game this year. Is an all-star in the WNBA, and she didn't make the roster. So it's not just Caitlin that was left off. Now, I'll go through a couple things that you said. One, the Christian Leitner thing. So reading this Dream Team book. Originally, when they were deciding on this first time that they were going to have NBA players play in the Olympics, they said they would have 8 pros and 4 college players. That was the original idea. So the locks were Michael Magic Larry, guaranteed. They thought Barkley, he was a lock. Ewing was going to be a lock. I think Karl Malone, David Robinson, those guys were all in. But then it was, okay, but we can't leave John Stockton off the team, and we can't leave Clyde Drexler off the team. So it slowly went from 8-4 to 10-2 to 11-1. And so that's where the Shaq versus Leitner discussion came. And to your point, Leitner at the time was the obvious choice. He was the best player in college basketball for 2 to 3 years running. He had made the Final Four all 4 years, back-to-back national champion. Coach K was a part of the process, so he obviously had some good say there. So there was a lot at play. 2012, Anthony Davis makes the team after winning a national championship, and it felt like that was, hey, we're putting you on. This is to set you up now in the future. We want you to be a part of this moving forward. The Caitlin side of it is interesting because what you said is, I think, accurate. It is a process. And you look at some of the players that made this team. Let's just go to 2 in particular. Kelsey Plum and Jackie Young in Tokyo played 3x3. So they were part of the Team USA system. They played 3x3. They played AmeriCup. They played under 19s or whatever else. They've been a part of the Team USA system. Asia Wilson, Brianna Stewart, Diana Taurasi, obviously. They've been a part now for a long time of the Team USA infrastructure that goes well beyond the Olympics. They've played many events. And I think that's where Caitlin is probably going to catch up, is eventually she's going to get more into the system, play more events, get more comfortable within the Team USA infrastructure. And to your point, I think they also know, look, she's not going anywhere. This is only the beginning. They know that they're going to have her for many, many, many years, many, many Olympics to come. But Sabrina Ionescu has proven herself and is one of the best players in the WNBA. You mentioned Stu, you mentioned Wilson, you mentioned some of the names that have become, stars at this level. They deserve it. They've earned that opportunity. They've earned that chance. And I do think that had Caitlin gone maybe to that training camp, and she couldn't because she was still playing all the way through the national championship game, maybe she could have proved herself there. She just didn't get the opportunity, and that's not a knock against her. She was trying to win a national championship. So I understand why people are upset. I understand that you can make the comparisons maybe to the past years. I think the Leitner situation was unique. I think the Anthony Davis situation would probably be a little bit more comparable and different at the same time. That was a relationship-based thing. He was probably already in the Team USA system. I think Caitlin needs a little bit more action in Team USA before they can just put her through. And I think that was their mentality here. Now, Chelsea Gray has been hurt all year. If Chelsea Gray can't go or if somebody else goes down, you never know. I mean, Caitlin's probably one of the first few that got left off. I know her team doesn't have a great record, but her numbers are very solid for a rookie. I mean, she's played well, and her and Aaliyah Boston are finally starting to build some chemistry. They've got a couple wins in a row here. I think they've won 3 of their last 5. So they're starting to figure it out a little bit, and I think she's starting to figure it out. And that's the other part is I think people were taken aback that she didn't dominate right away. I mean, LeBron James didn't dominate right away. Most players don't dominate right away, but I was at least confident that give her until the end of the season and she's going to be playing at the level that we all expect her to play. So this was not a question of her ability. I think it was a question of experience combined with, just to your point, you had 12 players on that team that all deserve to be there. And I think will represent the country well.
No, there's a pretty strong lineage of Syracuse alums, of course, that have been on the call for the Olympics. Bob Costas, Mike Tirico, notably, that have called games and, of course, hosted the entire thing. Have you had the opportunity to talk with either or both of them specifically about being a part of the Olympics, prepping for the Olympics, or maybe have you been in talks with those guys when they have mentioned this?
So I mean, Mike just being there now, certainly. And I saw him a couple weeks ago, and he was just saying how excited he was that I was going to get to do this, and I was going to get to be a part, of this large coverage and really lineage of Olympic basketball. And so we were just talking more about how awesome it's going to be and how bad both of our French is and all of that type of stuff. With Bob, I've gotten the great opportunity to just chat with him over the years. I haven't talked to him about any Olympic stuff necessarily, but he's always been incredibly gracious, incredibly supportive of me. And I think that just being in Bob's presence more than anything makes you want to be better as a broadcaster, as a communicator, more eloquent, more well thought out, whatever it might be. You just realize you're in the presence of this greatness and extemporaneous greatness more than anything. It's you take a step back and go, whoa, like this is a special person. So that's always been the takeaway with Bob. But Mike has been incredibly supportive. I've known Mike since I was a child. He and my dad were at Q's together. Everyone probably knows the story, but if you don't, my dad interned for Mike because he was, advanced and already working professionally as a student. So they were 2 years apart. It was Mike working, my dad interning, Beth Moen's interning, and they had a powerhouse in the newsroom. But yeah, he's been amazing for me, and it's going to be really cool just to be there. And we've got a great orange representation as always. I mean, NBC's got a lot of orange around, which is awesome for me. Maybe not as awesome for the non-orange people, but for us, we do wear it with pride. So it'll be real cool to kind of get over there and just try to be in our element, in our full zone.
On another note, you mentioned you're working on your French. I mean, it should be pretty good. You were just there for the French Open. You're going back, right? What an opportunity. And look, we've talked about the Super Bowl and all these kind of air quotes mainstream things, but tell me about your love for tennis and having the opportunity to essentially close out NBC's coverage of the French Open. It's going to shift over to TNT going forward. And there you are with Mary Carrillo and John McEnroe. And what was that balance like to call the event as it deserved to be called? It is one of the majors in tennis, and you want to focus on that. But there was also, an elephant in the room, so to say, like, we've got to end this here. And I think you put a very nice bow on it. But what was that like for you to do that?
No, I appreciate it. It was interesting. My dad said that it was as if I was Paul Rudd on Friends, and at the very end, everybody was going around crying. And then I just go, what a run. Yeah. I just parachuted in, but no,
your dad's always got the best references. That was perfect.
He does.
Yeah, that was perfect.
But it was amazing because I grew up a fan of the sport. I would go to the US Open every year as a kid. My dad was doing the event. My dad did the French Open for over a decade, I think. So I hadn't gotten a chance to go when he did it. And the first time I ever went was COVID, the 2020 year, with Tennis Channel. And Tennis Channel, most people don't even know, Tennis Channel was the first place to ever offer me a job. So the Clippers, everyone hears of. But Tennis Channel had emailed me, I think, right before graduation and said, look, you would have to move to LA, and I doubt it would be enough for you to just do this. But if any way that there's a chance for you to be moving to LA anyway, we would love to have you. And sure enough, the Clippers a couple weeks later offered the job. And I'm like, well, now this worked out perfectly. So I had been working with Tennis Channel since basically graduation. I did something with them before I ever was on the air for the Clips. And so to have that knowledge even built out further over the last 5 years, just being with them from someone who was a fan of the sport already was paramount to eventually get an assignment like this. So I got to do it in 2020 without fans. And I always felt like I wanted to go back. It's hard with the calendar and the basketball calendar at the time. The Clippers, I just didn't know if they were still going to be playing. And so now I get to a point where I'm not doing any playoff basketball, at least this year. And NBC still had it. And so they asked if I wanted to do it. I'm like, absolutely. But I didn't know it was going to be the last one when I showed up. We got there and they were still in negotiations. And Turner was in negotiations and Tennis Channel was in negotiations. Everybody was while the tournament was happening. And so we didn't find out until the news leaked on Twitter. Like that's when everybody found out. I think that's when NBC as a whole found out. And so we were on the air when that happened. Our producer called us. I think it was the second semifinal. So it was after the men's, it was after Sasha Zverev and Casper Ruud. Producer called us, told us the news, and we're like, well, you know what? We're going to finish strong. We're going to do a great job and go from there. And so to just be on the call for a final, even if I never get to do another one, which I hope I do at some point, but even if I never get to do another one, I'll always say I got to call Iga Swiatek winning her fourth at Roland Garros, and I'll get to say I got to call Carlos Alcaraz, who has a chance to be one of the all-time great players, and at 21 years old already has 3 Grand Slams. I got to call his first in Paris, and for a Spanish player, winning in Paris is a little extra special, and you could see it in his face, his emotions. So to just do that, to work with John and Mary, to get to be there for it and feel like I got to be the last voice, that's really cool. So yeah, is it a bummer that I potentially won't get to do it next year? Absolutely. But I'll always have the memory of getting to call a final. And for me, as someone who grew up a big fan of tennis, that's really special.
We've talked about so many different sports here and so many different opportunities that you have already had, which earned you an Emmy, by the way. Congratulations on that. That's pretty damn cool. I was very happy to see that.
I appreciate it.
And it goes back to something that I've heard you talk about, Noah, that we certainly talked about when you were in my class at Syracuse. And that is, while it's great to have a laser focus on something, you're doing now what I think you wanted to do when you got to Syracuse and when you were 8 years old, right? Play by play, big time events, especially basketball, the Olympics. Like that's the dream. But you knew, and this is such good advice for a lot of walks of life, but while we're talking about broadcasting, when you are at Syracuse, and I'm thinking about this because my daughter's going to college in the fall, and I'll have the same advice for her, whatever she chooses to do. You've got to do everything, right? While you have a focus, it'll all come into the clear eventually. By doing everything will bring you to the thing. And It feels like that's not just advice you get in some class that some professor like me is telling you. Like, this is all coming to fruition now. So I appreciate that you are the walking example of that. And I can tell people, and you can tell people, like, we're not just saying this. This is why you do a little bit of everything, because it brings you to a certain point.
I think that's incredibly well said. Doing everything brings you to the thing is exactly it. And so that was the advice that I got getting to school. And I really tried to immerse myself in it. I think I prioritized to a certain degree what I felt like I wanted, but it didn't mean I wasn't going to try it all. And so I really went heavy in WAER when I first got to Syracuse, but then I expanded from there. Once I felt like I built a good enough base and I felt happy and comfortable with where I was at and felt like I got to still enjoy being a freshman in college, my sophomore year, my goal was, okay, now let's just collect different experiences, collect different people, collect different roles, different sports, different non-sports, all of that. And so to your point, it was doing every possible sport I could. And a huge shout out to you and a huge shout out to Matt Park and really everybody that helped Olivia Stomsky build that, right? Building both the in-class experience and then the out-of-class experience was incredible. But when you realize you only have 4 years, and I think it's hard to realize that when you're 18 years old and you're a kid and you think that everything's going to last forever. I think any of us, as you're growing up, you're like, I've got so much time. I got so much of this. I can just take my time on it. you really don't. The blink and it goes by. That's the cliche you hear all the time, but it's true. Snap your fingers and the 4 years are gone. And so I think the best thing that I had was somebody who could guide me. And my dad was always there to at least just be like, look, do it your way. He never forced me in anything. He said, I want you to do it the way you feel is the best. But I would tell you that I think it's important to do some of these. And I always listened. And I think that was the other part. I didn't have to listen to him. I could have just said, I think I'd rather do this. But I felt like he knew it. He had been through it. And so it's probably smart to at least go through what he expects or what he sees. And so that's what I did. And I tried on air, off air, on camera, radio, morning news, anchoring the news. I never thought I would anchor a news show. You know what I mean?
Right.
Growing
Yeah.
up, I never sat there and was like, I want to do that. But figured, why not? Try it. Get better with teleprompter. Get better at talking about stories that I'm not necessarily ingrained and living in. So that makes you better than at the sports stuff. Because if you have to now report on something that's happening, we had the game that Michigan got basically exposed for sign stealing. We had that game this year. So now how do we report on that the right way while not, ruining the integrity of the game itself in front of us? I think those are all things that you learn by doing all the other stuff, by having different experiences. So it's the best thing that I did at Syracuse. It's what I recommend to anybody I talk to that's either in college, getting into college, just out of college. Just try any opportunity. Be a yes man. Be Jim Carrey circa 2009 and just bring the wealth to yourself.
Well said, Noah, and you're the walking embodiment of that. We are just thrilled watching everything that you're up to these days. The Olympics will be here soon. We're looking forward to your call of men's and women's basketball, and just continued luck and success to you and all that you're doing, and send our love to the family, and appreciate you coming on Syracuse Sports with us today. I know we'll do it down the road, but thanks for your time today, my friend.
You got it. I'll send love specifically to my sister, Erin. She's a huge fan of the Syracuse Sports Pod.
Well, thank you, Aaron. I
Yes.
really appreciate that.
Yes. No, I
That's
appreciate
fantastic.
it.
There you
Thanks,
go.
Brent. You're the man.